right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As I said, I know we're all anticipating this dialogue session. We're very excited that we have not one, but two of the ministers here, as well as the chairman of the Energy Commission, as we discuss the National Economic Transition Plan. NETR, NETR, however you like it. Please help me welcome Yang Berhormat Tuan Muhammad Rafizi bin Ramli, the Minister of Economy, to come up on stage. Yang Berhormat Tuan Nazmi bin Nik Ahmad, the Minister of Natural Resources, Environment and Climate Change, Malaysia. And Yang Berhormat Tuan Muhammad Rashdan bin Muhammad Yusof, the Chairman of the Energy Commission of Malaysia. Gentlemen, if you could join me up on stage. All right. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Lots of questions. I know we've got Slido. I don't know if we'll get there, because I'm sure you've got lots to say. I want to start off with you, YB Rafizi. We had this launch today, and, do you think with the current initiatives outlined in NETR will be adequate to help our country meet our global climate change agenda as we head into COP28, or more needs to be done?
I think if you look at the NETR today, it includes the LTLEDs, our long-term low emission strategy. We still have some, at least on paper, academically, we still have some gaps to close. But targets are targets. We can have a very nice targets on paper now, but without building the capability and getting the balls rolling, the gap will get bigger and bigger as we go along. So I hope the industry, society, and our international partners appreciate that it takes a lot of guts for this administration to admit that we still have some gaps for our net zero commitment, in spite of all the targets, and we've stretched as best as we can. We've stretched the RE installed capacity target by 100%, basically, when we moved the target from 40% to 70% for 2050. There's already a 100% increase. We've stretched energy efficiency saving target to 20%, which is actually very ambitious. We've stretched EV penetration to 80%, also extremely ambitious, to be frank. And even in spite of all this, we still have some gaps. So I think what we want to focus now in the next 5 years is to really get the ball rolling so that we build the capacity, because success begets success. If we were to lead regionally and we build that reputation, investments will come, capability will come, and that will allow us to close the gap as we move towards 2050, rather than sitting on our laurels and expecting plans after plans just to close the gap, but we never start. And that is a sure way for us to miss the 2050 net zero commitment.
Aim for the stars and hit the moon kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the moonshot things, Go for the moonshot, most probably you land on rooftop. That's good enough.
All right. You talk about the gaps, which is very interesting, because we've got, industry players. We've got the right people here. So continuing from your conversation about the gaps, right? How can then we position ourselves to ensure that we have a competitive advantage in terms of investments and trade, and so we can actually fill those gaps, right? And I guess if you look at Malaysia, where are our low-hanging fruits and strengths, not just as a regional, but global player?
We have all the makings to be not just a regional leader, but a star. Geographically, in terms of our natural resources, in terms of how diversified our economy is. It's just that I think sometimes we were bogged down in the last few years, in the last decade. We were really bogged down trying to sort out how to jump. So much so that eventually other people more faster than us. It's a dynamic world. It's a competitive market where investors has to decide where to put their money. This is where I think, if anything, NECTA is a validation of this administration's approach, which is it is important to pitch for the right sector with the right determination to get the early conviction of the international communities. And that takes one whole nation approach. And, PM was joking just now, perhaps the biggest success today is not really the launch of NECTA, the full document, is the fact that TMB and Petronas are on the same stage together. Because, more often than not, we see each other as competitors within our small market, right, when there is a lot of synergies and it takes the whole nation to work together. Right. And until we are able to prove that the government is working with our corporations, our champions, and then we can move the needle. And we have to tick all the boxes to make sure that the concerns and the requirements of the investors are met. And ESG and climate change and green compliance, whether you like it or not, while it may not be important to Malaysians, is extremely important to investors all over the world. If investors from New York, Japan, from London are not confident of our resolve towards net zero, and we don't demonstrate a robust plan, and we don't put the earlier plans to move towards that, they will bypass us, and they have bypassed us. In fact, I could have told this story. The whole idea about NECTA was because I was in Japan. My TKSU is here, Dr. Yat is here. There were three of us in Japan. It was at the launch of Asia Zero Emission Community. And I could feel how we were bypassed by everyone there. People were polite to us. We like Malaysia, you have potential, but we prefer other countries because there's nothing happening with you guys. And that's why we came back and say within 3 months, we have to do this, because unless you jump to be noticed, we will be bypassed. And that's exactly, I think, the validation that we have in the last few months, that if we pull our efforts together, takes one whole nation approach, provide a clarity in terms of robust policy framework, and put our initial money where our mouth is, then I think obviously then we will see more interest, and the funds and the investments will come into Malaysia again, inshallah.
Okay. A question for the Energy Commission, Tuan Muhammad Rashdan. Based on what YB has also said, what are potential challenges and roadblocks ahead? And I guess what are the steps outlined that we can, take to mitigate them?
Sure, Frida. YB Nick Nazmi mentioned in his keynote speech yesterday about, there's this quote that I'm going to requote, which is, there is no transition without transmission. And one of the biggest challenge of all is, of course, the state of our grid. The grid is fine as is, but given the huge, ambitious targets that's going to be put up, and I think it's estimated that the plant up of renewable energy needs to go up by 11-fold from today's levels. That is a huge tall order, and the current grid cannot accept that because of the intermittency problems. So there needs to be a tremendous amount of investment in the grid. And when we say the grid, it's not so much just the transmission towers that you see, but there's new technologies, which is energy storage, which is to convert intermittency into reliable, stable energy. That requires just shy of about 200 billion ringgit, maybe 180 at current prices. I'll just like to round it up, say 200 billion or so. And that is an enormous, obviously, investment that the administration and the commission needs to see, okay, if that is required, then how is that going to be funded? So the financing of the grid. So we all know, okay, we need to upgrade the grid. The question is how and who's going to pay for it. So we are working that out right now, and that is also a key component of the energy exchange, when we can tap into other markets at higher prices. And hopefully that would fund the system.
Okay, so who's going to come up with the money? All right. A question for YB Nick Nazmi here. So we are a country blessed with natural resources, and we're still an exporter for these resources. I think something we've been talking about. So how can we ensure that the transition is smooth and a win-win for everyone involved in making these changes, right? Because the reality of where we are in Malaysia, rich with resources.
Yeah, thank you. In my speech just now, and I think a constant thing that I've been mentioning day in, day out is that the transition must be just and equitable. We are a developing country. We've only started probably since the 70s, 80s to industrialize, to exploit our hydrocarbons, and to reinvest it in better infrastructure, better education, better development for Malaysia. You can't compare us with the big industrialized countries that for 200 years have been burning fossil fuel. They have been not just in their country, but even from our countries. They took it out, they industrialized, they created a very prosperous society. And suddenly they can't come back and tell us, no, you can't grow. Your middle classes should not have their aspirations because it's bad for the environment. I think we accept that. So I think while, that's why, I think what our companies such as Petronas have been doing is totally right. Where, we are not climate change deniers, and you have a lot of that even in developed countries. We are not climate change deniers, we accept that fact, but we also want this transition to happen as fairly as possible for the benefit of the people. To ensure that win-win scenario that we've been mentioning is that what we get now from our hydrocarbons, from our fossil fuels, it should be more and more invested into the green energy sector. Because this is a question on fossil fuels, right? Although this is a TNB event. So, Petronas, for example, they've done something to me that is really good with Gentari. Because we know there are other oil and gas companies out there, giants, who pay lip service on sustainability. But I have to say, when it comes to our champions like TNB, with Petronas, we've seen, it's a real commitment in order to go for this transition. But there are other things that we can look at it as well. When we talk about the hydrogen economy, this is where our experience, our expertise as an oil and gas country can be put to use to good state. And that is something that the government, I think under NETR, we've mentioned that, and we will be highlighting it over the next few months as well. So for us, we always understand that this transition has to be done in a way that's fair to the people of Malaysia.
I want to touch on one key objective, and one of which is economic opportunities, right? NETA is set to propel strategic and high-impact industries, especially MSMEs, and strengthen investments and create job opportunities. Can you paint that picture for us, YB Rafizi, for the man on the street, the benefits of NETA, the woman on the street?
Well, there's the impact to the industry, but there's also the impact because of the change of the energy market in Malaysia. So let's focus on the impact to the industry. I think it's common knowledge now that for the last 2 years, in 2021, 2022, the biggest investments in the world went into energy transitions. It was $1.1 trillion in 2022. It is expected to hit $1.7 trillion in 2023. So that's where the money is. And If we want to grow our economy, and by that we mean to create job opportunities, to scale up SMEs, it has to be in the sector where the investment is going. And that's why energy transition is identified as one high growth, high value sector to become the next engine of growth for the next 2-3 decades. Now, it is even better for Malaysia because we already have a very steady oil and gas service and equipment industry, because we have a very established oil and gas industry over the years. The foundation in terms of the technical capability, in terms of knowledge required between the OGSE and energy transition, the pivot is not such a high jump. It's quite a natural pivot. So as we pursue energy transitions at the highest scale with billions worth of investments, obviously this will have spillover effects. You know, if you're talking about unlocking the potential of solar rooftops, you are looking at installers, you are looking at people who have to service this. If you are talking about battery storage, or even biomass plants, you're talking about chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, who perhaps in the past worked on a petrochemical plant, now they pivot into energy transition projects. So there is a good fit that will be able to leverage on the existing SME capabilities in Malaysia to expand it even more to energy transition projects. To the common man, to households, and this is the part that I suppose when we first launched NATA Part 1 about a month ago, it has different reactions with different groups of people. Obviously, the stock market was more interested about which counters will get the benefit of this. Policymakers were interested about our net zero commitment, but to the average Joe, the households, they were most interested about how can I put solar onto my rooftop, and how are you going to do it differently? And as we roll out the single market aggregator, the exchange, we have this ambition of turning the whole market upside down instead of the current approach where households has to apply for a quota, and then you have to either through NEM or any other mechanism you have to supply back. We want to encourage more retail players where we can then monetize the rooftops of our domestic users. So instead of families putting 30 to 40,000 to put solar on their rooftops, basically the capex will be managed or will be borne by the companies, and then families earn some kind of income. So I'm quite optimistic that as we go along, more and more people will feel the effect of NATA and energy transition. Economics aside, that is extremely more important because we need to get the buy-in from society. We can't tell people that we have to be more climate friendly and we have to be more sustainable because our average household has to battle economic hardship. Unless the energy transition begins to translate into the kind of impact that is off their day-to-day concerns, only then we can get the whole society standing by this plan. Otherwise, it's just policymakers' ideas and commitments that doesn't cascade and translate into a change of behavior in society. And that's why I hope our energy transition journey is more robust and sustainable even than our international peers that had attempted it before. Because, we were slightly slower in rolling it out, but we had the benefit of hindsight. We know enough that as much as it is important, we have to balance between the need for sustainable growth with the kind of economic pinch it has on societies. And that's the kind of balance that we are trying to strike with NETA.
Right, and thank you, by sharing the idea about solar panels, everything, and I would think that was kind of more middle class. What about that? How do you connect that to the B40 community?
Well, B40 has houses. I mean, if you go, in fact, there are more rooftops outside urban centers than there are in Klang Valley. They're all over the place in Terengganu, in Kelantan. In fact, I know that in the future, the complaints will be it is discriminatory to the urban middle class because urban middle class live in condo. There are not much rooftops in the condos to monetize. But you will have a lot of the B40s with rooftops, or we still have, houses all over the place outside the urban centers. And that's how I think they can relate and they can benefit, not to mention the job creation, the 350,000 jobs expected to be created from energy transition projects. Obviously, this will go to a lot of the B40s and M40s as well, because we are creating more high-paying, more high-value jobs in the future for the younger generation, and the bulk of our society is made up of B40s and low M40s. You're talking about basically B50s and below. So I think over time, if we pull this off, more households will benefit from not just the projects, not just the rooftops, but also the economic spillover from the energy transition projects.
All right. I want to go back to power grids, and this question for Tuan Rashdan and also YB Nick. How important do you see investing into our power grids is, and maybe some details on how NETA plans to make our power grid more resilient, flexible, and intelligent?
Yeah, well, actually, just now, Danny quoted me, but actually what I actually said yesterday was that there are three most important things that the UK, this is an article that the UK needs to do when it comes to energy transition, and it's great, great, and great, right? So how important it is very crucial because our grid, it's very much based on baseload, stable energy that's provided by gas, by coal, and unfortunately, I mean, wind, we don't have wind assets at this point of time yet. That's technologically possible. Most of our renewables is basically solar. And solar, as mentioned, is intermittent in nature. And the other part is our tariffs are quite low. So things like battery storage is also something that we see is, for now, we don't have enough of that to create that stable supply of energy. So grid is very crucial because if we are not ready, I mean, we have countries like Vietnam. Vietnam, I mean, in terms of their solar installation, is truly impressive. But it accelerated at such a point, and the grid was not ready. So they had all these green electrons that could not be dispatched because the grid was not there yet with regards to energy transition. So as we go on this journey and we accelerate with our more ambitious targets under NETR and whatnot, the grid element must be we have to take care of it. And that's why, for one, we are allowing this cross-border exchange, because then we can capture the value that, Singapore, they're talking about building a cable all the way to Australia, all the way to Cambodia. I'm sure it's cheaper from Johor Bahru. So when we allow that to happen, then we can get that premium back and reinvest in our grids to create more batteries and whatnot. We are also, as mentioned, we are at the center of ASEAN, which means that, there's been talk of ASEAN power grid, I think, 10, 20 years, but the price of energy did not make sense for ASEAN power grid to be realized. Today, it has. Singapore and Malaysia has already been buying hydroelectricity from Laos via Thailand. And, so we are in the talk of Peninsula, Sumatra, and so on and so forth. So that will also be crucial because once you have a bigger grid base, and that's what happened in Western Europe, then you can accelerate the installation of renewable energy and provide that balance across the different countries and markets.
I'd just like to add, at the local context, the opportunity for us to literally leapfrog into the future. This is something that both YB ministers had mentioned. So I'll give you an example of that. So the grid of the future for renewable energy will actually be highly intelligent, very smart. So on all the rooftops that Rafizi was saying, we can have smart inverters. These inverters will know to the millisecond level the production of energy. Right. All of that data will be aggregated at the grid operator level. We will literally know which areas are cloudy or not. To be honest, through energy, we can even know weather patterns. That is just how fantastic the future holds. And of course, all that data combined with AI can then optimize load balancing and make energy efficiency much, much better. So this is the excitement of the grid of the energy transition of the future.
Okay, the NETA focuses a lot on decarbonizing our energy supply through the shift to more renewable energy, carbon management, and hydrogen. There is, however, one elephant in the room. In yesterday's discussion, the last discussion yesterday with Yang Mulia, we talked about nuclear, right? So, gentlemen, to both the minister and also to Russian, does nuclear have a part to play in our nation's energy transition? I know Yang Mulia wants to know.
Yes. Well, I think it will happen in due time. The policy structure of the government is as such that we go on 5-year plan. Of course, we look at planning and the numbers as we go along, but usually any major pivots, especially on something like nuclear, it's something that we have to bring throughout the whole government decision bodies and agencies. But I can say with clarity that I don't think we can be choosy, and I prefer to be agnostic, so long as it meets all our demands, all our requirements, and we have to be stringent with our requirements. But for us to manage the energy trilemma, I don't think we have the leisure to rule out anything. And on that, of course, it is still at policy level. Nick and I are working on it. Obviously, these are the kind of deliberations that eventually goes to the National Energy Council, chaired by the Prime Minister. But I can share, at least at my level, and the energy planning is, the macro energy planning is done at my ministry. I can tell and share with this hall today that we are not ruling it out. Yes, it's on the card, but there's a lot of things that we really have to be careful and start working on it.
I think just to add, what we lost, because for many, many years we had really good research institutions with regards to nuclear. However, it came to a point in 2018 when everything was closed down, or most of it was closed down. I think that's truly unfortunate, because if we know anything about nuclear, the moment you say yes, it will take many, many years for it to come to fruition, and you need that expertise, you need that skill set, and there are many skills, there are many specialists that we have in Malaysia. But when we made that decision, we lost out a bit. So like Rafizi said, I mean, we are not saying it's green light, right? But we do, it's probably amber, you're considering it because it has zero carbon emissions. Obviously, there are security concerns, safety concerns from the public. We totally accept that. But with changing technologies like the SMR, it's something that we cannot rule it out totally.
I just want to conclude because time is up. And I guess right now we've got October, the big plans, but just maybe a final word from each gentleman. What's the immediate action, most crucial thing right now on your agenda? I know there's many, but I guess the most immediate moment, maybe we'll start with you, Tuan Rashdan.
Sure. I think at the Commission, we are all mobilized and very focused on getting the energy exchange off the ground. The devil is actually in the details on the specific detailed procedures and policies of what that exchange entails and how that exchange can contribute to the grid plant-up that I mentioned earlier and the funding of which. YB Nick mentioned that the transition must also be just and equitable, obviously, and of course inclusive. But what that also means, and I translate that as the green burden of transition should not be put on the rakyat. So we must find a way to ensure that this can be done in a manner that doesn't impinge on the B40 or the M40, for example, but yet be highly beneficial to them. So they'll be net beneficiaries. So these are key challenges, and I'll just give you a sneak preview of all the aspects that we're working on right now, together with the policymakers at NRCCC, and then to get it approved at Cabinet.
YB Nick?
Thank you. I think energy has been one of the most fast-moving parts of this government. We've made many big policy changes, big announcement, new ambitious targets set. So the next challenge, as the Prime Minister reminded me just now, is that we have to realize a lot of the things we mentioned, because while some has been moving and some changes have started, but some, on the other hand, are waiting for detailed things like energy exchange, the relaxation of installation of solar, and all these new things. We need now to make sure that it can actually translate into real policies on the ground, because that's what people are looking for. I know that the investors and whatnot, they've been very excited by the early announcements, but they are also very observant, and they want to see if that is the next step happening or not, right? And I think we will continue to do that. And I think we've done some of the things that we've done is the tariff reforms. We will continue. It's slightly easier for electricity tariff compared to, say, petrol. So when we talk about climate change targets and whatnot, we will continue to do that. And we will have a Climate Change Act. We are going to have our Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act. So this will all move in tandem for a more greener future for the country.
The final say.
I have both the easy and the difficult part of the job. The easy job is I look at the overall policy, work with other agencies and ministries, get it done, and then pass to them to get it done. And it has worked quite well on NETA, and a lot of the implementations we work together. But the harder part of our job at the Ministry of Economy is a long-term alignment of everything for us to balance our energy trilemma challenges for the next 30 to 40 years. That has kept us on our toes, because we know in spite of everything, we will still face a big challenge 20, 30 years down the line in terms of making sure that our energy is secured, it is available at the price that is pro-growth and not punitive to the public. So our next focus, now that I think we have the middle term and short term action on the ground, is to really align, not just in terms of energy policy, but all the other macro policies, and those are usually the more difficult ones in terms of how we look at subsidies, in terms of how we align growth in different areas of the countries, in terms of upskilling the nation towards this. So we will slowly move towards the longer term at the Ministry of Economy, and making sure that the governance is done properly, and NATA projects, for example, the 10 catalytic projects, proceed as planned and will be monitored at the National Energy Council, so that we switch to the project management mode for the next 5 to 10 years to meet all these objectives, inshallah.
All right, thank you. And I know, of course, the journey is going to be, will have its ups and downs. And as we move towards, a more equitable society, there will be challenges. But I think, I want to quote from Tenaga Nasional, better energy comes when we act together, right? So on that note, thank you very much, Tuan Rafizi, YB, Nick Nazmi, and also Tuan Rashdan. Thank you to the gentlemen.